I started off in the martial arts when I was a child. I trained for decades. 2002, I launched one martial arts school, Be Mindful with Growth. I will do anything to be the best. I would get as close to my competition as I could. There are a lot of things in life you can't control, one of which is the economy. I learned that bigger isn't always better.
If you were to meet someone today is in that rough block, what would be the advice you would give to them?
There's so many of them.
Welcome to Chiseled for Success, the podcast where we share the real stories behind success, the stories of growth, grit, and the moments that shape who we become. I'm Monica, your host, a lover of continuous improvement and the never-ending journey of excellence, a lifelong learner, and a big believer that success isn't something we stumble into, it's something we're shaped by. Each episode, I sit down with real people to talk about the challenges, choices, and breakthroughs that helped refine them along the way. Not the highlight reel, the real process. If you're in a season of becoming, you're in the right place. And today, I'm excited to share a conversation with Jason Huett. Jason is an entrepreneur, CEO, and founder of Collaborative Commercial Business Brokers, a husband, a father, and a community contributor. I am excited to talk with Jason, as what really drew me to his story is it hasn't been a straight road. Lots of pivoting and lots of resilience. Jason, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Monica. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Great. So Jason, how are you feeling today?
I feel great. Yeah, it's January. It's 40 degrees out here in Wisconsin, and life is great.
That's awesome. Yeah, I actually woke up and the high today was 55 degrees. And my husband said that his phone wasn't saying that. We hit 55 degrees at 2 a.m. this morning. I don't know if you realized that.
I didn't. I had no idea.
Yeah, there you go. That's great. So Jason, our viewers, this might be the first time that they're seeing you. So if you were to meet someone for the first time today, what would you tell them about yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm a curious person, so I tend to be the person that's asking the questions. But if I had to give an answer to that question, I would say everything that you just said, it describes me. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. Have done it all my life. I don't know anything else. Had a corporate job once and lasted 5 months, and they asked me not to. They invited me not to come back, which was great. So, I would say an entrepreneur and husband and father is a great description.
And curiosity, that's one of my favorite values and something that I love to live by. So I think introducing yourself and letting people know you're curious right away gives a great lens into why you're asking questions. So way to build those relationships right from the beginning. So when we talk about our stories, in the conversation that I really want to have is the real stories behind the success and the authenticity and the journey. So let's start with kind of the rough block. Let's talk about a season in your world, your life, that you had a rough block that you started to work on.
That's a great question. There's so many of them that have happened. I think, oh boy, how do I even go about choosing one of them? But maybe to understand that, I'll give a little bit of context to your audience, and that is, I started off in the martial arts when I was a child, and I trained for decades. And I'm a black belt in a couple of different styles of martial arts, and that training really formed a good portion of who I became. I didn't realize it at the time, but just the physicality, the training, the mental focus that's required of the martial arts really had a deep impact. Bridging that to a challenging season, in 2002, I launched a chain of one martial arts school called Kicks Unlimited, and it grew very quickly. Teaching was a passion of mine. And in 2004, in my 20s at this point, 25 years old maybe, in 2004, I thought, I'm going to start to open more, because bigger is better, right? And so I opened 2 additional locations in the same month in October of 2024. And that was the beginning of what was going to be a very challenging, I'd say season, but it was longer than a season. it
Okay.
was it was years of challenge.
Yeah.
Uh, I'd say the 3 to 5 years that followed that was the season of challenge. Just underestimated. The lesson was be mindful with growth. Growth can be a great thing, but rapid growth can knock you down just as fast as not enough growth.
And when you talk about your passion of teaching, I think that's something just to revisit because of martial arts. So, how did your passion of teaching match into this fast growing business of martial arts?
Well, that it was a balance, and I think anyone that starts a business that is doing the thing that they're selling, you're passionate about that, and so that's really why you kind of go into it. At least that's why I went into my business teaching, and I always had a almost a tug of war between the technician in that business, the teacher, which I probably was proportionally better at teaching than I was at managing the growth. I was still pretty good at that, but there's usually one thing that you're just going to be better than anyone, and I was the technician in that business. So I'd say that tug of war still exists today. The tug between being the technician and being the person behind the growth still tugs at me on a daily basis.
Two completely different roles,
Yes.
right? You got to switch those hats. And when you talk about the idea of the fast growth and deciding to expand, what would you say was your definition of reflect or of your definition of success at that time?
I mean, in my 20s, I would say it was very geared financially.
Okay.
And being a young man, when you get out of college, you're used to being pretty broke, and then you get some financial
Yeah.
success. My mindset at that point in time was, I will do anything to be the best in this industry. And it was, looking back at it, probably, there's some ego in there, of course, young guy, but. Yeah, I had to learn some tough lessons to realize that success is. I define it much differently today than I did back then.
Yeah. And as you started to grow and expand, what were some of the memorable strikes that you took? What are some of the things that you did during that time that were some good lessons during that challenge? What were some of those moves that you made?
Well, I've always embraced competition, and so I always had a philosophy of I use data because my background's in marketing, and so I really believed in using data to help inform decision making. And that paired with kind of a no fear, especially in my 20s, no fear mentality. I would get as close to my competition as I could. I'm going to open up right next door if I could. And again, I've always kind of embraced, I'd rather find out quickly if I'm going to be successful at this or not. As I've gotten older, I've become a little bit more seasoned and a little bit more mindful of risk and risk profile. But yeah, I would say using data to make decisions, but also inspiring the people around you. How you make people around you feel is, I truly believe, more important than what you're teaching them. And that was something at Kicks Unlimited that I really focused on with my staff. I said, how you make every person that walks through that door feel is more important than anything that you could teach them while they're here. And I believe that.
Yeah. And how did you want them to feel? Like what was that vision of that feeling when they come in the door?
I always guided my staff and I said, here's what we want to happen after class. We want, as they're riding home, the parent and the child to be talking about the class and nothing else. Obviously I never got to ride home, but
Yeah.
I always imagined what would the conversation be. I don't own the schools anymore, but when my daughter enrolled in the martial arts, I got to be on the other side of it. And, so I got to see it from that perspective as well.
Yeah. And so that journey you just mentioned, you don't own them anymore. And so there was some crafting that you did to successfully exit the business. Talk about those challenges that you had, but the craft you applied to successfully exit.
There are a lot of things in life you can't control, one of which is the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And you can pivot, though. There's always the ability to pivot. And I started licensing my schools, selling the individual locations off as a necessity out of the Great Recession. Everyone, felt the kind of the pinch of that,
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't even say pinch; it was just a massive adjustment.
Yeah.
How business changed during that period of time. So I licensed my first school during that period of time,
Mm-hmm.
and realized that what can help the owners be successful. It can be good financially for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I kind of followed that licensing model, and then eventually had the opportunity to exit the brand in the final piece in 2017.
And you had that shift of licensing and other owners in supporting them. What were some beliefs that evolved going from being the owner, having multiple locations on your own, and then having other owners join you? What was some of the changes in beliefs that you had to have?
Yeah, major one. If you would ask me coming out of college, when I decided, hey, I took a detour after college in between that and opening my schools up. If you asked me coming in my 20s what my goal was to be the largest martial arts franchise in the country, and I learned that bigger isn't always better, and there's a lot of nuances to industries.
Mm-hmm.
There's just going to be certain industries that are not going to be built for that type of growth. The licensing of the franchise. I think we're fed and through whether it be business school or newspapers or magazines or online that hey you gotta make it bigger. It's got to be bigger. But I think the caveat there and the learning is it's got to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always mean it's going to be bigger. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't.
And when you think about that idea of everything should be bigger and maybe not better, where's other areas in your life that you have applied that lesson?
Oh, geez, that's a wonderful question. I've always had the philosophy of you just if you get knocked down, you get back up, and there's no emotion to it. That martial arts taught me that you get hit, you just get back up, and that applies to everything.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are, I think that there are lessons in this life that you cannot will your way to the solution. And so for me, I believe in God, and I think that there's always signs. There's signs along your way, and you can either choose to ignore them or listen to them. And the toughest lessons in my life were when I thought, I'm going to do this on my own. I've got the way, and I've got it figured out. And there's been some heavy corrections, but great lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things that I love to say is the world is always working for us. And sometimes there's a really big mess we're dealing with, but what is the message in that mess? What can we learn from
Oh, I
it?
love
And
that.
so definitely navigating that journey. As we kind of transition to a little bit more about today, so lots of lessons. Thank you for sharing, bigger isn't better, changing belief systems, working through adversity with economy. Curious about how that has now polished you and what does that look like today as you sit here with us?
I think the result is a more mindful approach. As we get older, I think we start to think about our legacy and how we're using our time.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely have more gratitude now today than I did 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think 15 years ago I was grateful, but just so busy
Mm-hmm.
with the day to day that I just had a difficult time, thinking, I'd say maintaining my mindfulness. Of course,
Sure.
when you have a child and you get married, a child will change your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's had a great impact. I'd say, overall, I'll never be maybe a 40-hour a week type individual,
Mm-hmm.
but I've definitely been more mindful with how I use my time and try to balance myself out better than I used to.
Yeah. Mindfulness is like a superpower.
Yes.
Let me ask you if we go a little bit of a deeper level on that. You talked about time. How else do you feel you're very mindful?
I think there's a more mindful with my transition. So, for instance, there's the time on the clock,
Mm-hmm.
but and I'll use that as an example. When my daughter comes home, I turn off my work switch, and it's uh, something I have gotten in the habit of doing because I want those hours with her, before she goes to bed.
Mm-hmm.
I think as we get older, we become more aware of time. We have less of it, and so it becomes more valuable. And so I think I'm more mindful today about how I spend my time,
Mm-hmm.
not just inside of my company, how I'm leveraging that time, but also what's the balance between work and family and uh, health. I would say is the other component. In my
Yeah.
first business, I was in great shape because, just due to the business, the
Mm-hmm.
martial arts. Uh, Now in business brokering, I don't have the same opportunities. So I have to be a little bit more impactful, and I have to carve time out to exercise. I never had to do
Mm-hmm.
that before in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's a big change that I made.
Yeah. So, a fun fact, if you haven't done this math since you mentioned data, there's 168 hours in a week.
Okay.
So, very profound to me. So, I always think about how am I spending 168 hours, thinking most things don't even take an hour. So, that's a lot of things we can get done. But I do cut out time for sleeping. So,
That's good. Yeah.
yeah, so for that rest. But yeah, so I always think about there is an abundance of time. It really just does have a limit. And so, how do we manage that? So many other things in life, we can just go get more. In
Yes.
time, we can't get
Yes.
more. And how would you define success? So, we've talked about your journey a little bit in regards to idea of bigger is better, kind of putting everything maybe into work or being unbalanced and
Mhm.
now being a little bit more balanced in your life. How would you say, this is how I define success today, differently than when you had that rough block?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think success for me is its impact,
Mm-hmm.
and so that falls into a couple categories. There's what kind of impact am I having on my daughter's life, my family? What kind of impact on the people around me?
Mm-hmm.
And it could be very micro, on a micro level. What impact do I have on a business owner that I meet? Even if
Yep.
I don't end up listing their business, I want to have a positive impact. But yeah, I think for me, it's you've got your work impact, your spiritual impact on relationship, and impact with family, and of course business.
Yeah, those are like great pillars to have
Yeah,
some good intentionality
yeah.
around. That's um, really well thought out and
Thank you.
mindful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
mindful. Yeah.
mindful. Exactly. As we just kind of take in kind of a closing reflection and thinking through um, your journey, if you were to meet someone today that is in that rough block, or someone, our listeners, feels like, you know what, I still have just a rough block that I'm starting with, what would be the advice you would give to them?
No, there's going to be a lot of twists and turns in life, and if you just get back up, if you get
Mm-hmm.
knocked back down, and you just get good at getting back up without a lot of emotion,
Mm-hmm.
without feeling down, just
Mm-hmm.
get used to getting back up. I always say there's no emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like martial arts. If you get hit, I just get back up. It doesn't matter how many times I hit the ground, you know,
Mm-hmm.
simply stand back up. And I think, I truly believe that it's the people that stand back up that just find success.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And Jason, that's why I'm so passionate about this podcast, is because sometimes what we only see is the standing up. We don't see the knockdowns. We don't
Yes.
see the shifts, the chiseling that has to happen. So thank you so much for being on our Chiseled for Success podcast today. And we just really look forward to continuing to have a relationship with you. And we are grateful you are in our world. So
Oh,
thank you.
thank you,
Thank you,
Monica.
Jason. And for all of the listeners, thank you for listening to our conversation on Chiseled for Success. I want to remind you today, if you are in a situation that you feel like you're knocked down, when you stand back up, absolutely start chiseling away, your success is formed.